In just 34 seconds, $47 million in campaign contributions and a career-defining accusation would crumble before the eyes of America. Pam Bondi didn't expect the microphone to capture her stammering. She didn't anticipate the documents scattered across the mahogany table. Cameras zoomed in mercilessly. The Senate chamber erupted in whispers and barely contained laughter. What did Bondi accuse the White House of that only revealed her own devastating mistake? At exactly 2:17 p.m. on March 15, 2019, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi walked into the Hart Senate office building like she already knew the verdict, but her leather briefcase nearly slipped from her trembling hands. The hearing room buzzed with tension. Harsh fluorescent lights reflected off polished surfaces, while C-SPAN cameras positioned themselves for what everyone assumed would be routine testimony. Bondi adjusted her navy blazer, cleared her throat twice, and approached the witness table with the confidence of someone who believed she held all the cards. Senator Elizabeth Warren sat like a predator spotting weakness, her reading glasses perched perfectly, a manila folder thick with documents resting before her like ammunition. The Massachusetts Democrat had requested this specific hearing after Bondi's explosive television interviews the previous week, where she'd made sweeping accusations about White House corruption and misuse of federal funds. Warren's staff had spent 72 hours fact-checking every claim, cross-referencing banking records, and preparing what would become the most embarrassing political takedown of the year. The chamber held its breath as Bondi placed her prepared statement on the podium. Her voice, initially steady and authoritative, she began with calculated precision, painting herself as a crusader for justice who had uncovered what she called the most egregious abuse of taxpayer money in modern history. Her words cut through the air with practiced certainty as she detailed her accusations against White House officials, claiming they had redirected $47 million in federal emergency relief funds to personal political campaigns. For the first minute and 33 seconds, Bondi commanded the room. Her gestures were controlled, her eye contact unwavering, her voice rising with righteous indignation as she described financial documents that supposedly proved systematic corruption at the highest levels of government. She referenced specific transaction dates, bank routing numbers, and even named individual White House staffers who she claimed were involved in the scheme. The gallery leaned forward, reporters scribbled frantically, and even seasoned political observers seemed genuinely shocked by the specificity of her allegations. But Warren wasn't taking notes. She was watching Bondi's hands shake almost imperceptibly each time she referenced her irrefutable evidence. The senator noticed how Bondi's eyes darted nervously toward the exit whenever she mentioned the source of her information. Most tellingly, Warren observed that Bondi kept glancing at a single piece of paper in her folder, as if double-checking facts she should have memorized if they were truly accurate. At 2:19 p.m., exactly 2 minutes and 11 seconds into Bondi's testimony, Warren raised her hand for recognition. The committee chairman nodded, and the Massachusetts senator's voice cut through Bondi's passionate speech like a scalpel through skin. "Ms. Bondi, I'm fascinated by these very specific claims you're making. Could you please show the committee the actual documents you're referencing?" The question hung in the air for 3 full seconds of devastating silence. Bondi's confident expression flickered like a candle in wind. Her jaw clenched in visible confusion as she fumbled through her briefcase, papers scattering slightly across the witness table. The microphone picked up every rustle, every hesitant breath, every moment of growing panic as America watched her composure crumble in real time. "Senator Warren, I have comprehensive documentation that clearly shows," Bondi began, but her voice wavered noticeably. She pulled out a manila folder and opened it with hands that were now visibly trembling. The cameras zoomed in closer, capturing beads of perspiration forming on her forehead despite the air-conditioned chamber. Warren smiled with the patience of a chess master moving in for checkmate. I'm sure you do, Miss Bondi. In fact, I've taken the liberty of obtaining the exact same federal banking records you're citing. Would you like to see them? The senator lifted her thick manila folder and gestured toward the committee's document display screen. What happened next would be replayed on every major news network for weeks. Warren's staff activated the overhead projection system, and suddenly the entire chamber could see official Federal Reserve transaction logs dated exactly when Bondi claimed the fraudulent transfers occurred. But instead of showing the corruption Bondi had described, the documents revealed something far more damaging to her credibility. The $47 million Bondi had claimed were illegally redirected to political campaigns, were actually legitimate emergency relief funds that had been distributed exactly as Congress had authorized. Every transaction was properly documented. Every recipient was a verified disaster relief organization, and every dollar had been accounted for through standard federal oversight procedures. The bank routing numbers Bondi had cited as evidence of corruption actually led to the American Red Cross, FEMA contractors, and hurricane relief nonprofits. But the revelation that destroyed Bondi's credibility wasn't just that she was wrong about the money. Warren's documents showed that Bondi herself had received $250,000 in political donations from the very Whitehouse officials she was now accusing of corruption. The payments were made just 6 months before her accusations, through a political action committee that Bondi had personally established and controlled. The chamber erupted in gasps, mostly shocked whispers from the gallery. Even Fox News correspondents in the press section shook their heads and exchanged bewildered glances. CNN's cameras captured every moment of Bondi's face, cycling through emotions: confusion, recognition, panic, and finally a kind of hollow defeat that made even her political opponents feel momentarily sympathetic. Warren wasn't finished. With surgical precision, she began reading directly from Bondi's own financial disclosure forms, documents that Bondi had signed under oath just 8 months earlier. Ms. Bondi, according to your official statements to the Federal Election Commission, you received substantial contributions from Treasury Department officials, White House staff members, and even the individual you're accusing of leading this supposed corruption scheme. Could you explain to the committee why you accepted money from people you now claim are criminals? The question hit like a physical blow. Bondi's mouth opened and closed twice before any sound emerged. Her hands gripped the edge of the witness table so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Sweat had now formed visible droplets on her forehead, and her carefully applied makeup began to show stress lines around her eyes. The microphone amplified every shallow breath, every nervous swallow, every second of her growing desperation. Behind her, Bondi's legal team exchanged panicked glances. One advisor frantically shuffled through backup documents, searching for anything that might salvage the situation. Another whispered urgently into his phone, likely alerting their media contacts that the narrative was collapsing faster than they could control it. The third sat motionless, staring at his hands, with the resigned expression of someone watching a career-ending disaster unfold in real time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Senator Warren, those contributions were legal and properly reported, but her explanation trailed off as she realized she was admitting to taking money from the same officials she was publicly accusing of federal crimes. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the chamber. Reporters in the gallery began typing furiously, crafting headlines that would dominate news cycles for weeks. Warren leaned back in her chair, with the satisfied expression of someone who had just completed a complex puzzle. She adjusted her glasses and consulted her notes with deliberate slowness, allowing the full weight of Bondi's contradiction to settle over the room like a heavy blanket. The senator understood the theatrical value of silence, letting Bondi's words hang in the air while cameras captured every moment of her visible distress. Miss Bondi, Warren continued with measured precision, let me make sure I understand your position correctly. You're testifying under oath that White House officials engaged in criminal financial misconduct, yet you personally accepted substantial monetary contributions from these same individuals just months before making these accusations. Is that an accurate summary of your testimony today? The trap was now complete and inescapable. Any answer Bondi gave would either contradict her accusations or admit to her own ethical violations. She looked desperately toward her legal team, but they were powerless to help her navigate a contradiction of her own making. The chamber fell into the kind of absolute silence that only occurs when everyone present realizes they're witnessing something historically significant. Twitter exploded with hashtags like Bondi fails and receipts provided. Within minutes, Bondi Meltdown was trending nationally, with over 50,000 tweets sharing clips of her stammering responses. Political commentators who had defended her just hours earlier began distancing themselves with carefully worded statements about needing more information and waiting for all facts to emerge. Conservative media outlets that had promoted her accusations scrambled to modify their coverage, with some quietly deleting earlier supportive articles from their websites. MSNBC interrupted regular programming to broadcast the hearing live, with host Rachel Maddow providing real-time fact-checking that further undermined Bondi's credibility. CNN's legal analyst dissected her testimony moment by moment, highlighting inconsistencies that became more apparent with each replay. Even Fox News, typically sympathetic to Republican figures, struggled to defend what anchor Brett Baier called a significant miscalculation in political strategy. TikTok users began creating videos mocking Bondi's visible confusion, with countless remixes of her stammering response to Warren's evidence. One particularly viral video synchronized her nervous gestures with a countdown timer, emphasizing how quickly her confidence had evaporated. Instagram influencers shared screenshot compilations of her facial expressions, turning her political downfall into social media entertainment that reached demographics far beyond typical political audiences. The digital pylon extended to professional networks, where political strategists and former colleagues began subtly distancing themselves through carefully neutral LinkedIn posts about the importance of thorough research and verification in political advocacy. Campaign consultants who had previously sought Bondi's endorsement quietly removed her testimonials from their professional websites. The most devastating moment came when Warren revealed the final piece of evidence. The documents Bondi had claimed proved White House corruption were actually preliminary drafts of budget proposals that had never been implemented. They were working papers, clearly marked as draft, not final, that had been leaked to Bondi by a disgruntled former Treasury Department employee who had been terminated for falsifying expense reports. The committee chairman called for a 15-minute recess, but the damage was already catastrophic and irreversible. During the break, Bondi sat alone at the witness table, staring at the scattered papers that had promised to make her a hero, but instead revealed her as either incompetent or dishonest. News reporters surrounded her legal team, demanding explanations that no one could provide. When the hearing resumed, Bondi attempted damage control, with a prepared statement acknowledging possible inaccuracies in her testimony. But Warren had saved her final blow for this moment. She revealed that her office had contacted every major news network that had aired Bondi's original accusations, providing them with the same documents that had just destroyed her credibility in front of Congress. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within hours, Bondi's Political Action Committee lost 3 major donors. Her contract as a television legal analyst was suspended pending further review. The Florida Bar Association announced they were reviewing her conduct for potential ethics violations. Most painfully, the White House officials she had accused released a joint statement expressing disappointment but forgiveness, calling her accusations misguided rather than malicious. By evening, Bondi released a statement through her attorney acknowledging errors in her research and apologizing for any confusion caused by her testimony. But the damage extended far beyond personal embarrassment. Her accusations had temporarily destabilized federal disaster relief operations, caused unnecessary investigations that diverted resources from actual oversight needs, and undermined public trust in both political parties. The hearing became a case study in political hubris, taught in journalism schools as an example of why verification trumps sensation. Warren's methodical destruction of Bondi's accusations demonstrated the power of preparation, documentation, and patience in political combat. For Bondi, it became a career-defining moment that illustrated how quickly confidence without facts can transform into public humiliation. 3 months later, Bondi quietly withdrew from public political commentary and returned to private law practice. Her social media presence dwindled to occasional personal posts, and she declined all interview requests about the hearing that had ended her aspirations for higher office. The final irony emerged 6 months after the hearing, when the Treasury Department employee who had provided Bondi with the false documents was indicted for fraud and conspiracy. His scheme to embarrass the White House had used Bondi as an unwitting accomplice, making her both perpetrator and victim of the very corruption she thought she was exposing. Confidence without facts is the fastest path to public humiliation. What happens when someone overestimates their knowledge in front of the nation? If errors are amplified by ambition, is power ever truly deserved? The Bondi hearing answered these questions with devastating clarity, reminding everyone that in politics, as in life, the truth has a way of emerging exactly when you least expect it. If this story entertained you or taught you a lesson about the importance of verification in public discourse, like, share, and subscribe for more political analysis and accountability stories. What's the boldest mistake you've witnessed in politics? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This dramatized story is inspired by real events and public figures. All dialogue and specific incidents are fictional for commentary and educational purposes. No defamation is intended, only illustration of the importance of accuracy and accountability in public service.